All right, I'm gonna try to do this in one take. This is a video I've wanted to make for a long time, probably, gosh, like close to a year by now. I don't know if you guys noticed, but and maybe you didn't. Maybe this is the first time you've ever clicked any of my videos. Totally fine. But I work in the MMA media, and I took probably like a 9 month break where I didn't really do anything for MMA media. Uh, I was covering the whole Asian MMA beat. I was covering Road to UFC. Last year, I even drove 17 hours out to Las Vegas to cover Road to UFC. And then I just kind of vanished off of the face of the internet in a lot of ways. I was posting minimally every once in a while. I'd post something on Twitter, but I basically had to pull everything back, and I'm gonna tell you all why I did that. I've worked in the MMA media industry for about 4.5 years now. I'm going to tell you how I got here, but I basically came to the realization that MMA media is basically a road to nowhere. Unless you're in work for the companies like MMA Fighting, MMA Junkie, unless you're locked in there, for all the rest of us, it's pretty much a road to nowhere. And I have given my heart and soul and everything I have to MMA media and MMA. I have made far less money than I should have the last 4.5 years. I've made so many sacrifices and it's hardly paid off. And at the end of the day, I found myself totally losing my passion for MMA. I found myself not wanting to watch it. I found myself kind of wishing I had never done any of this to begin with. And any kind of desire that I had to do things and build companies, travel around the world, had basically just been, all those dreams got reduced to rubble. And so, but I do have hope. And so this video isn't going to be a total just spiral down the toilet. I'm gonna do a little bit of that, and then I'm also gonna tell you kind of how I've had to adjust and where I see things going forward. My hope is that one, if you're in the MMA media, that this is really helpful for you. If not, a really stark warning of things that you really don't want to do. Hopefully this can be helpful for all the aspiring MMA media members or people that just, I don't know, want to have something to contribute to the MMA media space online. Hopefully this can be helpful for you, my journey, my mistakes. And if that's not you, if you're just a fan, you just kind of stumbled onto my video, well, this will be a little bit of a peek behind the curtain of the ins and outs of how the MMA media industry is working right now, and perhaps even just sports media as a whole, which is a microcosm of media and journalism as well. So this is June 2025. This is a day before I turned 35. And this is how I got into things. It was basically February of 2021. And at that point, I don't know if I've talked about it much before, but for probably 7 or 8 years up to that point, I had ambitions of moving back to China. I lived there in college a little bit, and I got an anthropology degree, had studied Chinese, and I had tried for 7 or 8 years to get over to China, and the thing preventing me was student loans, and I eventually paid those off, but then I had some health issues. Basically what I was going to do in China was I was going to join up with a tourism company. I had a friend that ran a tourism company in Southwest China, and I was going to work with him basically, and was going to move there and didn't really have any intentions on moving back. So that was kind of my future. And then that fell apart when I ran into some health issues. And it was about a year or two later that I started MMA Ecosystem. That was basically originally just a little side project to post cool pictures of MMA fighters. And as I got into it, I remember where I was. I was on the back porch of 1900 Barker, which is an amazing coffee shop in Lawrence, Kansas, where I was living at the time. I was sitting back there just reflecting and journaling when I finally just got this idea in my head of like, I posted some pictures of Chinese MMA fighters. That was really fun. China was still really important to me. I didn't think that I was going to be able to move over there anytime soon. And so kind of this idea formed of like, what if I created the MMA media that I always wished I had? I always was interested in what is going on in China. What is the development of the UFC? They just started this PI. I'd watch Tough China, all these things. And so I thought, what if I create the MMA media company that is covering the Chinese MMA beat? And maybe someday I could even travel to China with film crews and do cool documentaries, photo shoots, travel to fighters' hometowns, all this cool stuff to kind of bridge the gap in between the English-speaking fan base and China. So I started this little company, and what that really started as is I was just posting pictures of Chinese fighters on Instagram. I was doing little bios, kind of giving people previews of fights, and because nobody else was doing that at all for the Chinese fighters, all these fighters started following me back. I would get in conversations with them, and pretty soon, because there was no one else in the niche, I had this in with the Chinese fighters because I was the only guy that was giving them any kind of spotlight. That was really fun. That was exciting. I was kind of putting that alongside some cool fight posters that I would make for the big UFC fights. At this point, I wasn't really like covering the sport as much as I was just like giving a little bit of a spotlight here and there on Chinese fighters, doing some design work with posters. It was all good fun. Later, I got hired by Tapology because they were like, hey, looks like you know the Chinese MMA scene really well. We don't have anyone that really does. And so would you want to cover the records? That's how I got hired there. And then I started to pick up jobs with I think I've worked for 4 different MMA publications throughout the internet. Kind of some of those sites that are like, get your feet wet. But honestly, a lot of great sites like MMA Sucka. I worked for The Scrap, The All-Star, Sportskeeda. It was so helpful. I was mostly there just to like get my feet wet, make a couple dollars on the side, and get better experience, be able to get feedback from editors, that sort of thing. So that was really special, and I think that gave me a lot of great experience. I was able to go to local shows. I was able to go to Bellator shows with media credentials and do coverage for them. That was always really fun too. Loved that. And then it was about a little over a year later was when Road to UFC happened. That's what changed everything for me, because I started doing reporting on the fights. I tried to break the fights. I started with the fighters that I knew, which was a lot of Chinese fighters. I just reached out to a lot of the top regional prospects from China, guys like Lu Kai, and I was just like, hey man, are you doing this? Are you gonna fight in Road to UFC? And they're like, yeah. And this is my opponent, this guy. Well, I'm like, okay, this is an Indian guy. This is a Korean guy. I don't know them. And I didn't want to break the fights unless I had confirmation on both sides. So I had to start reaching out to the Korean fighters and the Indian fighters, the Japanese fighters. Pretty soon I'm like starting to post news for Road to UFC, and I'm getting a ton of traffic from the Indians. I'm getting a ton of traffic from the Filipinos, the Singaporeans, the Koreans. And this right here, this was the key mistake that I made, because I started to see myself as everything to everybody. I thought that every single market out there, I got a little bit greedy, and so I started to add in Korean MMA coverage. I started covering Indian MMA. I started covering Japanese MMA, every single other part of Asia, and I was basically trying to do what like an MMA junkie would do, but for all of Asia. I even went all the way out to Kazakh coverage because I looked at all these fan bases and they all seemed really underserved to me. And I was forming connections with the fighters, with managers, with the fans. And I really wanted to give them something that they would be proud of. And in a lot of ways, I think I did that. And I kind of worked myself up to be like the Chinese MMA news guy. And I worked myself even up to like doing that for a lot of these other markets. And soon I was posting all the UFC news, the new UFC beat. I was covering like half of the world basically of MMA news coverage, serving like half the world's population. And that was always a rush. Like breaking fights was always a rush. There was always something going on. And if you're wondering like, how on earth did you have the time for this? Well, about this time was when I moved to Portland, and this was summer of 2022. And at the time I was married, and we basically decided that like I was going to get to focus a lot on my MMA work. And I thought that if I gave MMA Media full-time attention, that it would take some time, but it would eventually become that. And so I was covering most of Asian MMA. I was starting a YouTube channel. Eventually I started a website. I briefly flirted with TikTok. I was like double posting onto Facebook. I was posting on Twitter. When Threads came out, I was hopping on there and just trying to do the whole like throw spaghetti on every single wall and see if just like a single noodle sticks and if there's any money that could be made. Working for publications, I either felt like while it was good experience, like I needed to make more money. Some of the publications that I work for, really cut the writing that they would do. And so some of my work got reduced or, just kind of got frozen with that. So writing for other websites, I didn't really see much of a future for that in terms of like being able to make anywhere close to a full-time income. So I was just trying to do what I knew how to do. And I think I was just so freaking busy. Like I was so busy all the time. You guys have no idea how organized I am with everything, keeping calendars and schedules and posting schedules and trying to write scripts for YouTube videos and seeing what events are coming up, doing things preemptively, scheduling it in the apps and editing videos, just so much work. And because I was just honestly hustling so hard, I hardly had any time just to like take a couple steps back and be like, is this worth it? Like, is this heading towards a good place? Like, if this is another 3 years of grinding before I make any money, like, am I going to be happy? And I forgot the key idea of like maximizing my joy in all of it, basically. And as I kept doing it, I remember the first time I started watching MMA events, and it was purely out of a like, this is just, like you go to the mall and they have those M&M candy machines that just like dump out M&Ms all in to a cup, but probably all a little bit onto the floor as well. That's just like what MMA events were for me, just with content. It's just to pull the lever down, see the content spill out, try to catch it, and then throw it out into the world. I've had so much joy from MMA in my whole life as a fan. I've been a fan since 2007. That was my first pay-per-view was Rich Franklin versus Anderson Silva, the rematch in Ohio. And I have over the years bought a zillion UFC DVDs and Pride DVDs. I have watched like every single UFC event. I have followed the sport as a whole all over the world. It's given me social media addictions. I've trained at a boxing gym, 2 different MMA gyms, a jiu-jitsu gym. I've had an amateur MMA fight. I've like, to say that I'm a super fan is just like such an understatement. And at this point, working for MMA Media, all of that was gone, and all it was just like hit the casino levers to see if you cash out. And I think the definition of burnout is when you make sacrifices over a prolonged period of time and you are not compensated adequately for those sacrifices. And that's just what MMA Media has become, is like, I gave up working like a regular full-time job where I could have been working towards my financial goals so that I could be working in MMA Media. And I did that for 4 years. I've made pennies off this, guys. Like if I showed you how much I've made off of it, I make some money for Tapology, and I'm so grateful for them. That's like been one of the few things, like, I'm not going to say I would work for them for free, but that's one of the places and the pieces of this where I feel like my passion is still really alive, is record keeping. But it was last summer, guys. It was about a year ago. Guys, a year ago at this time, I was going through a divorce. I don't think I've shared that on this YouTube channel before. I know that's super personal, but when you go through something like that, such a crazy transition in your life, it really puts you into a sense of survival. And we were not that like well off before that. And so when that happened, I was fighting for my own survival financially. And it just did not make sense for me to, not only did it not make sense, it could not happen for me to sit around on my laptop all day filming YouTube videos. And sure, my channel was like slowly growing, got monetized. I had a couple videos that did well, but I've still not made. I've got, like, at the time of this video, I think I've got maybe a little over 2,000 followers. Not much at all. Not much that's going to get you any kind of money that you can really depend on. And even if you are doing well, it's still like each video, you don't know how well it's going to do. You don't know what it's going to bring in. There's no sense of dependability ever. And I have like fought against algorithms and tried to crack the codes. I've watched probably hundreds of hours of trying to understand social media and how to get ahead of things. I remember on Instagram when there was a day on Instagram where I was getting around 300 new followers every day. It was around the time that Reels came out, and I was posting a reel or two every day, and I was getting so many followers. And then there was a day that Instagram changed their algorithm, and all of that dried up. All that dried up. I have not. I hit. I've stayed level for a couple years with Instagram with my follower count, if not like dipped a little bit. So it's just like this constant, like, you're playing games for your well-being. And when I started in MMA Media, that was kind of the last time I remember seeing and hearing other media members posting about, like, hey, I just got hired at this publication. I'm so excited to offer my skills, blah, 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 blah. And when was the last time you really saw that? When was the last time you heard someone post, like, I got hired at this place? I guess the exception would be Uncrowned, this new place, which I don't know how they're doing with web traffic or whatnot, but we've all seen, like, how Bloody Elbow versus Google turned out. Like, Google wrecked Bloody Elbow. I'm talking about the old Bloody Elbow. I'm not talking about the new owners. I'm talking about like the real journalism. Google wrecked that. And I know Google has wrecked all the other sites as well. I don't know how they're still making it through. You haven't seen them hiring anybody in a long time. So I hope that something changes to where those amazing kind of long running websites can stick around. But that's what the struggle is just like, if you're doing MMA media, you have to like be an expert in everything. You have to know how to shoot and edit videos, which I'm not the best at. I have a simple setup. I've got fairly cheap equipment. I've been doing this for 4 years now. I've been making and editing videos ever since I was in middle school. And yeah, it's just this constant die roll with your money and your fortunes, trying to get ahead of things, and you're not going to be adequately compensated unless you're like a mega account, which could happen. That could happen to you, but unless you're like immediately trying to take more of an influencer type, and I don't mean that pejoratively. I really just mean that by influencer, I say that you're kind of building your brand around yourself and your own identity and personality a little bit. I don't see how you're going to make it in the MMA industry. Like, if you have an Instagram account with 300,000 followers, like, what does that get you? There's some ways to monetize that a little bit, but like, you would think like putting that much effort into it and having this much of a following would have some kind of payback, but it really doesn't, guys. Social media does not adequately compensate creators for their work. The best is probably YouTube. If we're just talking about ad revenue, the best is definitely YouTube. Now, there's also sponsorships and things that you can do, but that really, I feel like is going to be a little more magnetic if you're building it off of your own brand and identity, where you're on camera, people are seeing your face, you're even maybe sharing a little bit of your life and personality with them. And I knew that I didn't really want to go that route. I didn't feel like my goal was always to have the fighters front and center. My goal was always like, when people see my account, I want them to see pictures of Sulong Rungbo, of Sim Kai-shong, of Liu Kai, of Toshiomi Kazama, of the fighters, these amazing athletes that are sacrificing their heart and souls and their bodies for the sport and for our entertainment. That's what I really wanted to champion. I didn't feel like I had the personality to build a brand around. I felt like I was much more of a behind the camera kind of guy. Now, I started this podcast, and that was something I did for a little over a year. And I think that was a really good experience. But again, it kind of became something for me that was draining, and it was something that I felt like punching the clock. And I think it was really good to cultivate a little bit of a community, but at the same time, it was like, that's great, but like, how ultimately is this gonna like give me any kind of stability? And there's definitely like this sense of, yeah, all of us have to like put in the time first before we're gonna get the paycheck back. That's true, but like, when you do this for 4 years and you've not pursued full-time work elsewhere where you could get just like a baseline income, and you're struggling along, and it's like, dude, I'm turning 35 tomorrow. I'd love to have a house someday. I'd love to be able to have a fund that I could like help my potential future kids with their college. I'd love to be able to do some of these things. And I haven't been able to do that because I've been focused on MMA media. And it's been a really fun ride in a lot of ways. I've gotten to do so much more than I would have ever imagined. I talked about how the joy of things really got sucked out of it for me, but there have been truly wonderful moments. I'm thinking about being backstage at the Cable Dahmer Arena in Independence, Missouri, at an FAC event. Dana White was there, the Nelk boys were there, and I was backstage when Josh Fremd got the news that he had been signed to the UFC after competing at this event. That was kind of my first like in-person moment, anything like that. And I was able to break, I mean, it's not like a huge story, but it was just like this cool moment of being in this crowd of people. I remember being at a Invicta event, and I think that was the event that Aaron Blanchfield KO'd Victoria Leonardo with the head kick. And I remember just like the moment of with the other media members where we were just like, we as like media members, but also a little bit as fans, were just so like blown away, and we just had this really dramatic moment of reaction. Even thinking about last August, guys, like getting approved for my UFC credentials and driving out to Las Vegas, having the time of my life in Las Vegas, getting to have time with like Alex Bahunin and Cece Legaspi and some fighters and managers, and being shoulder to shoulder with all these people that I've been talking to online through WeChat and Instagram DMs, and actually being able to sit across the table from them and have an audience with like the UFC, and being able to go into the Apex. Like that was a dream. That was amazing. But guys, like I lost a lot of money just to do that. I spent hundreds and hundreds of dollars to make that trip happen. I didn't really make anything off of that. That was all for free. And like, again, like there's an element of like, if you're going to chase your dream, you're going to have to make sacrifices. I get that. I'm not complaining about that. But there is a breaking point where you have to say like, if I'm not finding joy out of this, and all I'm doing is sacrificing and getting nothing back, then where is this going? And if you're an MMA media creator right now, it's like, if you have a dream, chase it. But at the same time, like, do you want to still be doing this in some regard 5 years from now? Or are you going to burn out and flame out because you're trying to do everything and carry everything on your shoulders for pennies? You got to think about that. You got to think long and hard of that. Covering this news beat is not something that's going to get you paid. And I think most of us, when I'm looking out at the other MMA media members and creators, especially the solo ones, I know they're not really getting paid for what they're doing. And maybe they just want to do it as a hobby, and they have the time and space to do it. They have another strong source of income. That's great. But just like the MMA media world is as like a ladder in a career path, it's dead, guys. It could come back. Who knows what will happen in the future? There could be alternatives to monetize that become more popular. But right now in 2025, MMA media as a career path is dead. There are no companies that are hiring. There is no future. And your best bet is to either do it as a hobby, try the influencer route, and try to build things off your own brand through video. But if you want to be a writer, unless you already work for one of these big websites, you're not going to make money off of that. I tried that. I tried serving an audience that was vastly underserved, and I made literal pennies off of that. A year of writing weekly articles, 3 to 4 articles every week for a year. I made pennies, guys. I hardly made anything. And I don't know, I don't know what I should have done differently, to be honest. And the main thing, I guess, that I should have probably done is, when we are trying to build a brand, We're trying to grow and expand. I talked about the throwing spaghetti at the wall to see what sticks. There is always the temptation for more. There's the temptation of, I'm doing this, but what if I did these other things? What if I was on all of these other platforms, to see if that works out? I think like I'm actually in that stage right now where I am looking at other platforms. I'll talk about that in a second, but like, I think just being more informed on things before I jump in and get hooked on posting to TikTok or something. Yeah, just be very careful before you just start putting a hand in all of these different places. You need to like, it's weird to say, but like, you need to safeguard your own well-being. And what I was noticing with myself, guys, is I thought that I would not fall victim to like social media addiction and always being on my phone. I thought that this was all just a business and this is work. I can put down work whenever I want to, but the MMA news beat never sleeps, guys. It is 24/7, 365 days a year, and it's global, so the sun is never setting on MMA, to be honest. Even now when I wake up, there's always this like fear of like, what if I missed out on things and I need to do some posts real quick. So it's never ending. And if you take a break for 2 days, you're going to miss out on things. If you try to have a weekend, you're going to miss out. I thought that I was better than that and it wasn't going to affect me, but I developed a deep addiction to my phone, to my laptop, to screens. And I'm still wrestling with this in a lot of ways. I'm a lot better than I used to, but just the feeling of that feeling of missing out, of like, what if news happens and I'm not one of the first to repost it, report it, is really real. Because with social media, like, if you're the 212th person to post about this fight, you're not going to get the traffic that you would have gotten if you had something ready to go. Like, what I would do is I would look at, I have a spreadsheet with the whole entire UFC roster, rankings and all that good stuff. And I would try to predict which fights were going to happen. And then I would make a poster based off of those predictions. And then I would make a caption for it too. So that if that fight got announced, I already had the post ready to go. All I had to do was just change a few details and then post it. So that was like just living in that all the time of like, is there anything new? Is there anything new? That developed a deep addiction to technology. And what I noticed was that was not without other casualties in my life. And I noticed that my attention span over the last couple of years has been wrecked. I was also diagnosed with ADHD a little over about 2 years ago. But guys, I used to read so many books, and up until recently, like, I would try to read books, but I couldn't get past like 2 paragraphs. I just couldn't do it. My attention span was just wrecked. Even watching movies, I could never make it past like 10 minutes. Following conversations got harder. My brain was sort of just terraforming into a smartphone. And it was all just like, not just my brain, but I just felt like my whole being was becoming this machine of see something, turn it into content, spew it back out, analyze the analytics, the data, the feedback from that post, and then make the adjustments. And being caught in that system, it was just like addicting, and I got sucked into that, and I never really gave myself the space to like step out of that for a prolonged period of time and catch my breath. And it took me like, as I would just like every single morning, I sit in a chair for about an hour And about 20 minutes of that is just silence. I'm just sitting there, and it's a time for me to meditate. It's a time for me to pray, and then I'll like journal for a little bit. But I begin my day with silence and with solitude, and I just like got to a point where I could not hold a thought for more than like 30 seconds. And if I would try to think about one thing, it was just like, I have ADHD, but I think that it just like ramped it up to 1,000,000. And I reached a point where I was like, I don't want to live my life like this. I cannot live my life this unfocused and this chaotic in my mind. I will not let my brain become a smartphone. And so this was right after I went to Las Vegas last year. This is probably like September of last year. The money and career stuff was on my mind, but I hit this point where I was just like, I just need to be around people. I need to be able to read a book. I want to spend time outside. Like, I want to sit across the table from people and have real conversations. I want someone to look me in the eyes and understand what I'm going through. And I need to get out from behind the laptop. So I didn't know where that was going to lead me. I don't know what was going to become of MMA ecosystem, but I knew that there needed to be a change because I did not want to live my life like this. I didn't want to get to the age of like 55 and look back and been like, I've lived on soup and crackers for the last 20 years. And I struggle to have relationships and conversations with people. I've not read books. I've not been able to like live my life outside of my laptop. Like, I don't want to get to that age and look back and just have seen my whole life disappear into the void. And so yeah, I had to take some time off. And what's crazy, guys, is I actually saw my attention return back to me. I deleted Instagram off my phone. I deleted Twitter off my phone, deleted YouTube off my phone, all my social media apps. And, this kind of starting to sound like one of those typical like digital detox kind of videos, but I felt so much life return to me. And I found that it took like a little bit of time, but I was able to like calm down and have a sustained thought for 20 or 30 minutes at a time. I was able to, I built up like a muscle. I was able to build up the capacity to read again. And I'm able to read now, again, for the first time in a couple years. I feel like I have more meaningful relationships in my life today than I have ever had in my life. And that's with people that live in my city that I see all the time. And I would say I'm probably in like the best season I've ever been in life. And that has come at some of the sacrifice of letting go of pieces of MMA ecosystem. And I just tried to do everything, guys. I tried to be everything to everybody because I wanted this so bad. But in the process, I sacrificed my internal equilibrium for MMA Media, and that's not worth it. So I did not want to... I felt myself like not loving MMA anymore. I mean, this is a whole nother video that I'll make another time, but like MMA Media and MMA in general has become a lot less fun to me. And part of that has nothing to do with my experience with it, but it's about how the sport has changed and, all the stuff we always complain about, Apex shows, politics, all that stuff. But MMA became less fun to me, pretty much like no fun to me, just totally joyless. Watching events was basically just having it on the background and logging results, but not even watching the fights, not even caring about the fights. that's what MMA became to me. And if that's what I'm doing and I'm not really being paid for it, then like seriously, what's the point of that if you don't even enjoy it? So I knew that if I ever wanted to enjoy MMA again, even just as a fan, I needed to change my relationship to it. So I gave myself the freedom to watch MMA events that had literally no obligation or no content that would come out of it. And that was sort of the beauty of being able to just like take a step back from MMA ecosystem. Was I would watch Asian fights and Asian fighters on UFC events that I would usually be all over talking about, breaking it down, writing articles, but I just got to watch them. And I wouldn't say I'm like as much of a fan as I was before I got into MMA media, but like it is coming back and just giving myself space to actually enjoy the sport again, push everything out and just like watch it again. Like it doesn't come back right away, but it is starting to reclaim. And I think too, like when I'm able to just focus on the fighters as well, I notice that my passion starts to come back. So that is always, I think kind of my center point with MMA is just like find the fighters that are interesting to you, find the fighters that are in my niche, and just shoot them a message and say, how you doing? Or, tune in to watch their fight, but don't post anything. So giving myself that space. And even like here in Portland, I live 2 blocks away from Providence Park, which is a soccer stadium. It's the home of the Portland Timbers and the Portland Thorns, which are 2 Major League Soccer teams in Portland. And I had never been to games before. I'd never been to a professional soccer game. I don't know jack shit about soccer, to be honest. Most of the rules that I know about soccer was when me and my sister rented an N64 game in like 97 or 98, like a FIFA game. And I learned some rules from that. That's like what I had to go on basically. But it's a 5-minute walk from my front door. And so I've been going to especially like Portland Thorns games because I was just like, man, like I live this close. Why wouldn't I go to these games? Especially they're not that expensive. Excuse me. And so I started going to Thorns games a couple months ago, and it was this new sport. And I found myself having memories of MMA kind of in 2 ways. It was a little bit of memories of when I first started getting into MMA back in 2007, 2008, of like being so green and not really understanding how things work, but just knowing that I liked it and following just like 1 or 2 media members that cover it and getting my news from them and feeling like it's this huge world that I don't really understand, but it's just a fun thing for me to take part in. It's reminded me a little bit of that. And then it's also reminded me of going to Invicta FC events. Probably my most precious, like favorite MMA live experience memories are all with Invicta FC. I used to live about 45 minutes from where all the events in Kansas City would take place, or still do take place, but I used to live around there, used to work in Kansas City, and I've probably been to like 12 or 13 Invicta events in my life, and I cannot even express how fun that was for me. And it gave me this deep passion for women's sports, to see women's sports emerge and grow and take ground. Because ultimately, like what as I've thought about like what is my love of MMA, not just like the combat, the excitement, the thrill, even the fighters, but like what specifically, when I boil it down, really excites me about MMA. And I think the thing is seeing something small grow and develop and like claw its way into new territory. It's why I've always loved watching the UFC go to new countries and cities. It's why I've loved watching MMA grow in China. from The Ultimate Fighter China and Art of War up to a Shanghai PI and a Chinese champion and multiple ranked Chinese fighters, and co-main of UFC 300 is a Chinese fighter versus a Chinese fighter. That seeing that expansion, gaining new ground, being interpreted into different cultures is what keeps me going. And so I think I see that in women's sports as well, of like, it's this scrappy, very underappreciated side of the sporting world that, in my opinion, is just as exciting, if not more exciting. And because of that, I feel like the athletes compete with this chip on their shoulders of like, I have to work extra hard to entertain and prove to people. And that's what has really enticed me about women's sports. So like, going back to these Portland Thorns games has, I think, like, reignited a little bit of my love for sport as a whole, and shown me like what I actually really love about MMA and the niche that I've chosen to cover. And so, I think I've just needed to give myself space to reappreciate MMA again and remove the obligations and the content, and just be in the space with MMA in silence on my own without posting. Nobody knows it's happening, but I'm just able to lie on my living room floor with a beer and a bucket of popcorn and just like watch it and take it in. I don't think I'm totally there yet. I'm still trying to like fan that flame and like breathe on those coals, because for me, like, I don't want to lose my passion for MMA. I really thought about walking away from all of it, not just as media, but as a fan as well, over the last couple months. And weirdly enough, I continue as I get older, I think, to have an aversion to violence. I'd call myself a pacifist. And that is, I know, not common as an MMA fan, but I've questioned even like, do I even think that this is moral or ethical? And I don't really know where I stand on all that. I just know that I think that the fighters are super interesting, and I don't know where I stand personally morally, but it is exciting to watch. So that's that, I guess. But yeah, I want MMA to be fun again. I mean, don't you want that? Don't you want to be able to engage with MMA on websites and social media, and it just like feel really fun and not put this like gross feeling in your stomach? Don't you want to just like be able to enjoy the purity of the sport? I don't know if that's ever totally going to happen, but I knew that like, whatever my engagement with MMA is I want it to be fun. That doesn't mean that I want to shy away from the hard and difficult things, the truths, and do some of that journalistic work and appreciate and consume that kind of journalism. But at the end of the day, like, the baseline needs to be that I'm having the time of my life watching this and covering this. And I think when as a media member, your joy and love for the sport comes through, then that's really winsome, and that's really magnetic, and that's almost like your brand in and of itself. Again, like, there's always frustrations, there's things to complain about, but if at the end of the day, this doesn't like give you good memories that you're going to look back on, like, what's the point? Do another job. Like, work in an office or a factory or a bakery. Like, do something else. Why are you watching cage fighting if it's not gratifying to you in some way? So I guess that like, that kind of leads me to like, where am I going? Like, as I've fought to preserve my own fandom in MMA and taken steps back, like, yeah, where does that leave me? And I don't have all the answers yet. I definitely don't think that there is a future anytime soon for me to watch MMA and work in media and do all the things and make a full-time income. I've given up on that dream, and I think if that happens, it's going to happen. But what I have learned is that covering MMA needs to be more of a hobby than a job. That doesn't mean that I see it with any lesser degree of professionalism. That doesn't mean that I don't give my best effort to what I have, but it does mean that there's going to have to be a scaling back, because I have to have a life here. I have to make money. I have to feel like I have an internal sense of peace, and that I can have a life where I'm able to think clearly. And I've been like pushing hard to become more analog in my life, and I'm breaking away from my phone, believe it or not. I'm breaking away from my laptop more and more. I'm going on runs. I'm walking up to the rose garden near my house and smelling the flowers, very literally. I'm going on hikes. I'm going backpacking this summer. I'm getting coffee with people. Those kind of things are so important to me. And so for me, I think MMA Media has to be a hobby. And I think when it is in that place, then it can be what it needs to be. And if it's going to grow, then that's great. But otherwise, that's just what it needs to be. So I've made the choice to scale back the range of the kind of coverage that I have. I'm kind of just focusing on Chinese MMA and Road to UFC. Those are my two prongs, and those are the two places that I've got the deepest hands. And I still have an awareness of everything else, still follow everything else, but in terms of like covering things, that's what's going to be. And I've looked at a lot of different mediums. I still don't have all the answers, but like I've looked at a lot of different mediums to cover the sport, and I just don't know if it makes a whole lot of sense for me to start a new platform. My website, I'm keeping it around, but I'm not posting on it. I haven't posted on it for many, many months. I'm kind of just sticking right now with my two platforms of Instagram and YouTube. And even with YouTube, I've kind of scaled that back a little bit too. I want my presence on here to be a little bit more raw, a little bit more unedited. Doesn't mean that I won't do a really thought through, finer point kind of video essay from time to time. But yeah, I want to stay on YouTube. I want to give my thoughts. And I think it's also appropriate for me to be a little bit more unguarded and a little bit more raw. And kind of like this video has been, but I really want to, like, if I have strong thoughts about something, I want to share that. But I'm really only going to be talking about the things that excite me and that I really want to cover. I'm done just like looking at the metrics and being like, well, this is what the people want, so I'm going to make content on that. If there's alignment there, great. But like for me, I really want to cover the things that excite me. So that's what kind of videos are going to come out. No promises on how often. I'd love for it to be every week. I kind of love this rhythm of like Tuesday, Wednesday nights, coming into my bedroom, setting up the studio, the lights, filming, and then editing, putting it out that upcoming Saturday or Friday. I love that schedule. We'll see how it can hold up. It's still, editing videos is definitely time consuming. So I have to figure out a schedule and a pace that works for me, and in a way that I can just maximize the joy out of it. If this was a job where I was making a full-time income, then there's room for places where things feel like work. There's room for just like the grittiness of it. But for this to be a hobby where I'm not making much from it, it needs to be joy. And so that's what I'm really emphasizing going forward. I think just the key is just to keep that sustainability. And again, if you're a creator, someone in the MMA media space, what is it going to take for you to be in this sport 5 years from now? 5 years from now, do you want to still love MMA? And thinking about what you may have to sacrifice, like how can you just not only cover a broad spectrum of things, but how can you maybe scale back and ensure that you have space to really enjoy the sport of MMA. I'm even thinking about, I'm planning on starting to train Muay Thai again this summer, which is a big step for me. I haven't trained martial arts since 2017. That's 8 years ago. And I'm working on getting in shape because I want to have a way to actually be shoulder to shoulder with other fighters and athletes several times throughout the week, and for a lot of my connection to the sport to actually be real life relationships that I'm not just talking over messaging, but across the map. So what can you do to really thinking through the ways that you enjoy MMA? Stick to that, like more of that. How can you be around in this space 5 years from now and still love the crap out of it? So think about that. I don't ever feel like I can just walk away from MMA for whatever reason. And I've given so much to Asian MMA, and I still have dreams of going over to China and covering events in person and hanging out with athletes and doing cool content. But I've got to have that long-term vision. I have started to get some ideas of what if going forward with MMA Media for me isn't even just looking at what other people are doing. I think I've started to think through okay, MMA Media is dead from the sense of a career path. Breaking into MMA Media in 2025 is dead. But maybe there's some room for creativity in ways that we can still do what we love. And there's some different methods out there, some different ways to both monetize it and combine our passion with it. And I don't even want, even as I say it's dead, I want that to be a place where it's it's dead, but how can we build something new? Is there any freaking way on earth that we can build something new out of this, and in a way that doesn't feel like selling out or just posting dumb, stupid clickbait content? I don't know. I'm still thinking about it, and I'm watching what other people are doing in the space. But I think it'd be so cool if I could be part of the solution of here's how you can actually make money off of doing what you love. And, just keep it, if it's meant to be a hobby, just keep it as a hobby and be content with that. If it grows to something bigger, then that's great too. But, yeah, let's dream a little bit. Those are all my thoughts. Pretty rambly, pretty long, but there you have it. That's why I have been out for the last many months, but getting back into it, and we'll see you soon.